Hey everybody, this is Los Angeles-based comedian Sam Wiles, and you're listening to Jim on Bass.
Hey, it's Ryan from the Jim on Base Show, the podcast that brings you closer to your favorite athletes and entertainers. And I want to give a huge shout out to my friends at Claim to Fame. They have some of the best jackets out there that I love to wear. You can rock them for date night, a casual outing with friends, or even while doing a podcast. They're lightweight, they're durable, and perfect for any setting. My favorites are the dark blue, the olive shade, and if you want to switch things up and go for a lighter color, one of my favorite go-tos is the Pacific blue. So check them out at claimtofame.com for all their different styles. So make sure you click the link so the next time you step out, you'll be feeling good with Claim to Fame. Welcome back to another episode of the Jim on Base Show. For today's very special guest, we have on a LA-based comedian. He's a writer as well, co-creator of Gridiron Sports from Bleacher Report. He's also been featured in the New York Times, and he has a new comedy album called Here Comes Success. We also have another thing in common. We've both never seen Ted Lasso. Please welcome the great Sam Wiles. Sam, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. I'm doing good. It's nice to get a Bay Area LA rivalry going as soon as you can, especially hot off Thursday Night Football.
Yeah, exactly. 49ers Rams, and didn't end in the Niners' favor, so you're happy. You got your hat on and everything.
I'm psyched. I'm psyched. It didn't feel like football season started until Puka Nacua came back, and
Yeah.
now I'm pumped all the time. I'm now old enough where I could biologically be his dad. So I'm just like, hey, look at my son out there. He's doing his best.
Well, I thought it was interesting. How did you become a Rams fan? Because before we started, you said you had some St. Louis gear. So how did it all start for you?
So I lived in St. Louis when I was a kid. I lived
Mhm.
there till I was about 10. And my dad's like a diehard NFL fan, but kind of an NFL agnostic. He just like loves football. Like he was playing fantasy football with himself on paper in the 90s. Like he's got all kinds of like systems and spreadsheets, but like before Excel, like he's got notebooks of stats he kept himself. So my dad's like was so into the NFL and to the point where like he would have me pick games as a kid, just like at random, like, do you think the Bears will beat the Browns? I'd be like, yeah, an animal will beat a color or whatever. And so he like kept that as a record, and so he was super into football. And then we lived in St. Louis, and I think I like wanted to like the local team. And when I was like a really little kid, and they were terrible. They had like Tony Banks, and they just traded Jerome Bettis, and I think gotten like still had Isaac Bruce, but there was like they were terrible. Like the first couple of years, I like was cognizant of football, but I was like very young. And then really when I like became old enough to watch football, greatest show on turf, the best, the best thing ever. And then we moved to Iowa right after that season, and we moved to Cedar Rapids, where Kurt
Mm.
Warner's from. So, and then
Wow.
actually, my Pop Warner coach was Kurt Warner's Pop Warner coach.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I had like super connections to that team, like obsessed with Greatest Show on Turf, like really way too. I have so much gear from that time that that's like obscure, like Ricky Prohl cards in a frame or something, like so into that team. And then stayed a hardcore Rams fan through what I would argue some of the worst football you could ever watch, which is like the Steve Spagnuolo head coach era and the John Linehan coaching cycle. And then eventually Jeff Fisher was like the best coach. Like,
Mm.
they were still bad, but he would at least like would be like, well, our guys on defense are mean. And then like watch like Chris Long and Robert Quinn like try their best on these like one in 15 teams or whatever. And then I moved to California after college, and then I moved to LA when the Rams moved to LA, and it was just totally coincidence. And it was like, this is great. Like I get to have this hometown team, and like I never like it's never been the case for me really since I was a little kid, and it was like this rocks.
So
So
basically, the Rams kind of go where you go, I guess.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, if entertainment really bombs out and I have to move to like Siberia or something, I'm excited for the Siberia Rams. It's gonna be
Well,
fun.
well, I thought it was interesting too. So you're obviously a big sports fan, and you were co-creator of Gridiron Sports. So how did that all kind of come about?
Yeah, so Gridiron Heights is a cartoon that's on Bleacher Report. It's an NFL cartoon, and me and a buddy, and we neither of us work there anymore, but they make awesome stuff. And back in the day, it was 2016, and somebody came to my friend and was like, "Hey, we want like an animated series," and we were like, "How do we make like kind of The Simpsons but for football?" And truly, the joke that sold it was that it was when Tom Brady was suspended, but he was wearing he was ostensibly like a passive Trump supporter. So we wrote "Make Weeks 1 through 8 great again" on a hat, and that's like that like sold the series. So that was fun. It's like such an easy joke, but it was like people were like, "Ah, you got him." Like I think the Brady hate was so palpable. It was like you could sell anything off that. Like it was like everyone was like, "Yeah, yeah, six." There was a real like era. It felt like with Tom Brady, where it's like now everyone's like, I think a little more appreciative, and like he's in the box, and you're kind of like you've softened on him or whatever.
Mhm.
And like those Buck Super Bowls, like were or the Buck Super Bowl was like, oh, he is like that good. It's not just Belichick, whatever. Back in like 2015, that was like peak like hating on Brady. You could make
Yeah.
stuff up. You'd be like, Tom Brady can't even read. You'd be like, that's not true. But like everyone would just go, yeah, yeah, I hate that guy.
Well, it makes me wonder when you come out with jokes like that and it catches fire, people get into the series too. Are there any players that became fans of your work that you kind of heard about or got to meet?
No, I have no idea. I've seen later because then we wrote the early version and then we were kind of out, moved on to other
Mm.
stuff. And but I've seen players really be into it, and that is like cool. It's like, oh yeah, that's like a little thing that I started, and like you get to see that later. Yeah, as like such an NFL head is like you hope that certain positions don't get mad at it because it's like
Yeah.
feels like every quarterback is like a nice guy, but they don't even want to like stuff publicly. That's how like non-controversial they are. And running backs are like always like grinding it out, and then wide receivers are like so cryptic and offended constantly, and like even on like a good team, they're like mad. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Hmm.
It's like I hope a wide receiver never sees anything I've ever done, or I'm gonna get tweets that are gonna be like, "You snake." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's gonna be it's gonna be bad. I never want to cross AJ Brown. I just be like, oh, this is yeah. Those guys could be offended by anything. It feels like early bad girlfriends you have in your 20s. It's just like
Yeah.
I don't know what I did, but
It kind of relates to the comedy world because everyone's so sensitive. You got to always worry about that.
no one is nearly as sensitive as like Stephon Diggs. Like there's no like Brandon Ayuk equivalent
Mm.
in the crowd. Like, I mean, if there's a comedy club, it's a scene. Like they ruin the show. So it's like there's not even close. Most people are pretty cool. So
Well,
it,
getting over to your comedy album, it just came out basically this past week, right? A few days ago.
yeah. So it's technically my second album. My first album, I wanted to record something on my own, like back in the day, and I was really into kind of like the how do you do this solo, and this was all. But I was like, oh, I'm gonna do it like labelless, so I can like do kind of some weirder stuff,
Mm.
have some intro sketches and stuff, and I was really trying to work very indie, and I was into the process, and I found like a recording studio in near like my like where I grew up in Iowa, and
Hmm.
we packed a recording studio that's like usually just for like indie rock bands, and it was like so fun. And the day we recorded that was March 14th of 2020. So then it just the next day all the material was irrelevant, and then we were in
Mm.
lockdown for another year. It was
Yeah.
like, oh man, so none of this makes any sense. Like everything I'm talking about, I'm a relatively topical comic, and like everything was like, who cares about what you're saying? All that stuff is gone. We're all inside now. Who cares? And so I put that out, and then was like, oh man, I'd really like to have a chance to like redo some of this material and give this another shot. And obviously, a bunch of time has passed, and hopefully, I'm a much better comedian than then too. But linked up with a Special Thing Records, which has put out some of my favorite comedy albums of all time. They put out Patton Oswalt's records. They put
Mm.
out Paul F. Tompkins records. They put out like Maria Bamford's. They put all these like amazing like kind of the Gen X heroes of mine
Mm.
of like when I really got into comedy. It was listening to those a Special Thing Records albums, and a Special Thing Records also used to have the only like comedy message board. So I would be like
Mm.
in middle school on their board, like dorking out over like Zach Galifianakis at the Purple Onion or whatever. And so really cool to work with them. And it's like 35 minutes. It's more like an EP, but comedy, I think really gets bad if it's too long. Like when like Dane Cook or Dave Chappelle would like try to break the record for how long their set
Yeah.
could be. It's like, who wants to see that? That is terrible. That is the exact. I want to watch comedy for 4 minutes. That's the ideal amount of time for comedy. So the new album is I think it's good. I'm really proud of it. It was we recorded. I ran a show in LA for almost 10 years with my good buddies in LA. One of my buds was this guy James Austin Johnson, who's on SNL now,
Mm.
and our other friend Zach Pugh, who's like a really funny stand-up in his own right, also has a new album out on a Special Thing. but we ran an indie show in LA for 10 years that it was called Rod Stewart Live, and it was like the first 5 years we did it in a bar where like we got heckled the whole time, and it just kind of made us like pretty bulletproof and like made us much better at comedy. But it was like every week just like suiting up to go just get yelled at by like the craziest people on the east side of Los Angeles. So that was very fun. And then the show got popular, and then we like sold. Then the back half was like so easy. It was like most of them sold out, and we like had a great time, and that was very fun. But the album is the final show.
Mm.
Is you can hear the tone of it is the like audience is very like live
Yeah.
in the album because they're like it's the last thing. It's this like cumulative thing. So really fun, really proud of the album. Yeah, get it everywhere you can. It's on Spotify, it's on iTunes, and or you could buy it on the website, and then you'll have it'll be the first thing you play when you get into your car, and you'll go, which is every time you buy music.
Well, when it comes to like you said, you like comedy to not be too long. The perfect length. You can put it on and go for a drive or
Oh,
whatnot.
it's the best. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Get through the grocery store, you'll enjoy it. You might even listen to it twice. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you mentioned the SNL connection there. Do you know Michael Longfellow then?
Yeah, good buddy.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
really? I met
Best.
him. Yeah, I met him over the summer in Tahoe at that celebrity golf tournament.
Oh, rad. Yeah, he
Yeah, I got.
rocks. He is the most chill guy. You couldn't raise his temperature if you tried. Like he's no one is more relaxed or having a good time. But
Yeah. Well, I looked over and saw him. I was interviewing Colin Jost, and
yeah,
then he was like just with him, hanging out. And then I
yeah.
saw Colin Jost that night at the event center, and then
Okay.
Michael was opening up for him. So it was pretty
Yeah,
cool
yeah.
to
Yeah.
get a 1-2 punch.
It sounds like Jost is like a really good about taking the new
Mm,
cast on the road with him because it's like I think it is like SNL in your first year. It kind of came out this year. It like doesn't pay very well
yeah.
for having to live in Manhattan in 2024. So like he'll do a good job of like taking those guys out on the road and letting them make a couple extra bucks. So
Yeah, that's
um,
cool.
but Michael's great. He's like he's so fun. If your listeners have never seen him do stand up, it's like he is fantastic at stand up. He's so good. Like such a quick mind and good joke writer and like the smoothest delivery. Like if you liked any of his Weekend Update stuff, like he really is like a treat to watch do stand up. He's
Mm.
really great.
Yeah, I really enjoyed him opening up, so I hope I can see him down the road. Maybe I'll
Yeah.
see you guys together, working together.
Oh, I mean, yeah, once in a while for sure.
Mm,
And Andrew Dismuke's also on the show. Good buddy.
mm,
I'm open for him in the spring, so
okay,
you might see me out there. And
awesome.
then yeah, and then this last summer, went on, did some touring with James, and we ended up doing closer to election season. I do a JD Vance impression, and he obviously does Trump on SNL, and we did live Trump Vance, and that was like very very fun.
Yeah.
That's like one of the most fun things I can think of now of comedy is to like just riff as those two as the people who run our country, but are clearly much more cartoon characters than
Yeah.
respectable figures, and it's very fun to riff as them. It's a good time.
Well, you mentioned it there. You've done some political humor and impressions. JD Vance is one of them. That
Yeah,
kind of caught fire on TikTok, right?
yeah, yeah. I got really big on TikTok right as it's going away,
Yeah.
which is really good. See, I'm really good at timing. That's you're getting the sense of my comedy career is it's all I'm fantastic with timing. Uh, I started doing JD Vance just like for fun, just to kind of like goof around. And I am always my album. You'll tell is like it's relatively topical, but it's like relatively political too. And I am kind of obsessed with conservative media figures. I find them like I find the weird ones very fascinating. And my fiance and I were talking about just like what an odd guy JD Vance is, and then we were flying to a wedding, and I was just trying to do talk like he talks just for fun, and I was like, oh, this is like so easy. And a lot of my stand up is like it's stylistically if someone's like what kind of stand up do you do, it's like that's always such a hard question because it's like I don't know, it's kind of in the eye of the beholder a lot of the time, but a lot of my stand up is here's a scenario, here's dialogue within that scenario. Like the way I talk is a lot of like here's a sketch, but it's me playing both parts. I would say that advertently, but like that's kind of what ends up happening.
Hmm.
And so I was just trying to think how JD Vance talks, and I just started writing, and I like wrote like a notebook's worth of stuff, just weird stuff he says, and like or would say, or like things I think he's like afraid of. Like you get this very like sheltered guy, Ned Flandersy sense of him, but if like Ned Flanders was also pure evil, and so it's like a very easy like guy to think like. And so I ended up making a bunch of videos on TikTok with kind of no thought behind it, and they got pretty big. So yeah, the couple million views
Wow.
for some of them, and I went from like 300 followers to like 50,000 in like 2 weeks or something, like
Wow.
some insane trajectory right there at the beginning. And then yeah, ended up being in New York Times and BuzzFeed and USA Today and a bunch of publications, and then was making them up until the election. And then I was like, oh, I got to rethink this because this isn't as fun anymore.
Yeah.
But he'll come back, I think, in the new year in some capacity because it's become just a character. It's not as much.
Mhm.
Hopefully, it's a little catharsis for people, like
Yeah.
when he bans diet soda for women or whatever. It's like you
Yeah.
can you can like have a little fun at his expense. Hopefully, that'll be more enjoyable when we're not so close to the election. So.
When someone like that wins, do you have kind of mixed emotions too? And Trump's, is it kind of like good
Um,
for comedy in a way, but bad for everything
No,
else?
I kind of think it's bad. I think comedy got worse when Trump was in office because it's
Mm,
like it's just not as silly. It's like the stakes are higher. Like
yeah.
I think it actually isn't as fun. Like a lot of the I think the swing we got of like we kind of got this swing back to like hyper masculine kind of like conservative-ish comedy like the Rogan Sphere and
Yeah.
Tony Hinchcliffe and all that stuff. I think that's an answer to comedy getting kind of bad under Trump is that the comedians that were dominant at the time decided they needed to be important and talk about issues and stuff. And I just don't think like people love that stuff all the time, especially if they're inundated with it and if it's not very funny. And if it's
Yeah.
like so then the pendulum's going to go the other way towards like well, let's have these conservative guys aren't as concerned with it, so then they're going to be goofier and they probably will be more fun to like listen to and engage with, and like that makes sense to me. I like get why that happened, and I think now, I mean, probably I think comedy will hopefully get a little I guess what I like is like a little more cerebral and a little goofier, but also a little more like damn the man, a little more underdog-y. It's not supposed to be the dominant form. So it's supposed to comedy is much better when it's the underdog. It sucks when it's this big like important thing. That's comedy's
Yeah.
bad. That's like it's not I don't think it's ultimately an arena medium. It's supposed to be
Yeah. It's
in
become like a media, like a
side room.
mainstream almost.
Yeah, no, I mean so like you get like I think the good stuff is in a side room where you're going like we're not supposed to be making fun of this guy, but like let's do it over here. And like
Hmm.
that's much more fun, I think, than being like comedians have a responsibility to discuss
Yeah.
whatever. I don't, it's like whatever you think politically, it's like it's not fun to like go along with mainstream thought. That certainly doesn't lead to interesting comedy. So
Whatever Joe Rogan says. Yeah.
well now it does feel like comedy has to have this like fealty to this guy who is so powerful and like does Austin is its own scene completely. Like it
Mm,
doesn't they don't need the rest of show business. They can do whatever they want, which is like kind of crazy.
yeah.
But again, it's I think comedy's better when it's more underdog.
Well, does being you've come out with Here Comes Success. You've done writing for Bleacher Report. You've done a bunch of other stuff too. But do you feel like being a writer makes you a better stand up, and being stand up makes you a better writer?
Oh, that's a really great question. I think that you can be too writerly and it makes your stand up suck. And because you aren't performing enough, because it ultimately is
Mm,
a performance, and you can be too like obsessed with your own cleverness, like jokes with like a lot of wordplay and stuff. Though that like makes me want to barf. I like hate it,
yeah.
but I also think you need to be able to write good premises that communicate effectively. And like really, it's like can you communicate your idea? And there's a certain amount of clear writing that has to happen. And for some people, it's like that happens automatically. They just like the way they talk, the way they spit out their idea. I think we were talking about like I think Longfellow is like that. He just
Mm,
immediately can communicate a premise that he thinks of. Our buddy Andrew Dismukes is like that. Just how he talks is how stand up sounds. And you're just like, oh, it's for some reason it's just so natural. It's like writing's not even really part of it. Where I think sometimes you can be overwritten and that makes the stand up bad and not funny and also like ineffective. Like it just doesn't. People don't know what you're talking about.
mm.
But then also there are people who are like born forces of nature who just come out and are all persona, and it doesn't really matter if they're good writers or not. They're like inherently funny. It's like was Bernie Mac like the greatest writer? No. Like but he was the funniest man alive, so it like doesn't matter. It's like everything that he said sounded funny. It's like yeah, okay, great, I'll watch that for hours.
Is that something that maybe like a new comic you could see does? Like maybe they're over prepared in a way, or
Yeah, well, and I'm sure I was that way. I mean, I think I list I it's you want to talk about like torture, like on par with like having water dripped in the center of your forehead. Is like go watch your old stand up if you're like a 10 years or more stand up. Is like go watch your second year. Your first year, you're so excited, you're almost being like carried by enthusiasm. Year two is when you're like, ugh, who is
Mhm.
this guy? Like trying on different personas and like different joke writing styles. Like I'm watching like I started in San Diego, which is like the weirdest place to start comedy. And
Yeah.
you're like trying to win over this crowd of like Marines, and you're like, this is like it's like, dude, what are you? You're trying so hard. This is humiliating. But yeah, I mean, obviously, it's like anything. There's always like a delicate balance, but the best comics are really good writers who don't overthink it, and then are still really good performers. So.
What made me wonder when you were saying that, do you think comedy is kind of like sports where as an athlete you can go out and make an error, you can screw up, but you got to be able to go out and, keep your head in the game and produce again? If you have like a bad set, is it easy to kind of get in your head and be negative? Do you kind
I
of have to
think
shake it
about this
off?
crossover. I think about this crossover all the time in terms of like when I think about like honing a skill and working really hard at it. The thing about sports is it's way harder. Like comedy is actually just like you're kind of doing a trick. Also, you're like,
Mm.
I know this trick works a bunch of times. Where like sports is like this is like everyone knows what you're gonna do. It's like you gotta really. I do think you have to like really dial down, but like drill into like what works, and you only get to do it for like a certain amount of time. I think about like the NFL play calling. It's like
Mm.
every offense only works for like a year, and then you have to like think of it entirely. Like Sean McVay has to think of like 90 new wrinkles every week or whatever just to get by. It's like stand up. It's like you do the same old bullshit for like ever. Like
For a
you could,
career sometimes, right? Some jokes.
I mean, probably not as much anymore because there's so much footage. But it's like
Mm.
Catskills guys in the 50s. They did 10 minutes and then they died at 80. They did
Yeah.
like, there was no growth. They didn't do anything else. That's all they did was this 10 minutes that was just like so schmaltzy. Um, the, did you see the SNL movie, the one that just came out?
No, I need to see that one though.
There's a great part in it, and I don't think this happened. I think the best parts of that movie are the stuff that didn't happen that they kind of
Mm.
invent as kind of analogy. But
Okay.
there's a part where the Lorne Michaels character is watching Milton Berle like do this like cheesy dance like in another studio at 30 Rock, and like you can feel like you're like, oh, that stinks. And J.K. Simmons plays like a very evil Milton Berle, and it rocks. It's
Mm.
like a really cool performance. But he's doing this like dance with showgirls where he's like being a little scandalized, and it like sucks. It like radiates like awful suck. And Lorne Michaels like, we have to do something different. And you're like, that didn't happen in real life. But the transition of like comedy need to come in and be something totally different at that time was like, oh yeah, that like that old stuff can't just constantly be fine with everyone all the time. And but that's like those are like 70-year blocks.
Mm.
And then like sports is like, oh, you got to figure something out. Like
Yeah.
you gotta do this like right away. Like this
Do
is
or
so
die.
yeah. Yeah, I think honestly, I think about football in comedy terms like so much, and
Mm.
then vice versa. It's so I mean, it's also like I just now am kind of getting some success at like in my mid 30s where like it just took a lot of like grind time, and it's like I do think the like how much I like think about sports. I was like a high school football player and stuff is like how much like I am just kind of willing to keep doing stuff. Like I do think of it as like I have like a sports mentality that way sometimes, which is so unfunny and so stupid. But like, I am like, oh, I can like kind of physically endure the road. I can like go do things a bunch of times, and it can kind of suck and like hurt my feelings. And then I'll be like, it's fine, and it'll make you better. And like,
Mm.
that is like close. I will say it is funny when how many comedians will say that they train like for boxing. It's like he's like Louis C.K. used to say that, and like Martin Lawrence just came out and was like, I've been in the boxing gym to train for my stand-up special. I was like, what are you talking about? Like
Yeah.
it's not that similar. Like it's not literally boxing. It's metaphorically boxing.
Yeah.
So
Especially Louis C.K. I don't see the physique.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Martin Lawrence. I mean, he looks like a bowling ball.
Yeah.
they, it's very funny to take something that's clearly a metaphor and be like, it's literal. I'm literally boxing. Like, okay, dude, do you not understand? Like,
Yeah.
it's very funny.
Well, since we're talking about comedy clubs as well. I always like to talk to comedians and ask them what they remember about their first open mic. Like what went behind it, where was it, how did it go?
Um, I have a very weird comedy origin, which is I was in college. I was like very depressed. I wanted to try something. I did the open mic in my hometown in Cedar Rapids, Iowa at Penguins Comedy Club, which sadly no longer exists. And I did pretty good. I like got up, I did like 5 minutes, I did pretty good. And then I was like, okay, got that out of my system. I'm never going to do comedy again. And then I did semester at sea, which is like a weird program. I don't even know also if it exists anymore. You take your classes on like a cruise ship and you go travel somewhere. And I got some award to go do it. And it was like me and a bunch of, I'm not like a trust fund kid or anything. And it was me and a bunch of trust fund kids and then like my two high school buds. And it's supposed to be a big party, but like we had a lot of weird things happen where they were like, we were supposed to go to Istanbul, and Istanbul, there was like a terrorist attack or something. And so we were just stuck on this cruise ship with a bunch of other college kids you don't know. And they're like, well, we can't give you all alcohol. Like that'll be terrible. So they're like, we're going to have a talent show. And then I did the talent show. I did stand up and I won the talent show
Hmm.
because I think no one else cared. And then I did a one man show at the end of the trip for an hour. So I did
Wow.
5 minutes of stand up, 5 minutes of stand up. I did an hour of stand up
Your first hour.
about like what we'd all done. I did ostensibly a one man show, and then got back to my hometown, did the Cedar Rapids Penguins open mic again, bombed as bad as I ever could in front of like a big crowd. Got like buried by some local guy that was like mad about like the freeway, and I was like, oh, I'm done. That's the end. And then I finished college and like waited another year, and then moved to California, and then kind of gradually got back into it. But
Hmm.
in San Diego, because there was like a fun, because I lived like kind of by the beach, and like there was a bar by the beach that had like a comedy contest, and I was like, I've done comedy before, like what if I won $50? Like, and so yeah, so then I like got back into it. But that was
Wow.
my origin story, was very weird. And San Diego is a crazy place to start too, because it's like so machismo that
Hmm.
like if you don't have that persona, you got to like earn something else, like you got to be clever in a different way. And I think that was very good for me. I got like I like got outright booed like when I started, and I think that was probably good.
Yeah.
I had a guy. I remember I did a show. My like first show ever in San Diego was during I think it was a Bulls Hawks playoff game. It was the Joe Noah Bulls, I
Hmm.
remember, and I got a bottle straight up thrown at me like the first my first sentence because someone was like, I was watching that, and I was like, buddy, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
Like you were watching that and I'm interrupting you. Like you were, yeah, it like makes you go like, oh, why would you have to give the audience something they want to watch? Don't
Yeah.
obscure their, no one owes you this. Like you just have, like you're ruining his time. You're ruining his basketball game.
Well, speaking of sports and comedy, I was watching Adam Ray. He did like a live stream the other day, and I had him on the show about a year ago. And he mentioned how he got to roast the Seahawks. And
Oh,
I,
that's cool.
yeah, and he's from Seattle. And I was thinking, I don't know. I guess if I knew I was gonna kill, that'd be great. But that would be a little nerve wracking for me to roast any team, let alone my favorite team.
Oh, I think it's like the thing I couldn't do. I think in
Yeah, it was.
comedy, I'd be too like irreverent. I'd be like, yes, Mr. McVeigh, you're doing a tremendous job. Good job, coach. Like it would be so toothless. I'd be like,
Yeah,
oh man. Although I think if you have any wide receivers in football that are would be nice to you, it's probably the Rams wide receivers. It's like Cooper Cup and Nakua are pretty are seem like real sweetie pies. They don't really have the diva thing going on. So I
yeah,
think
that's true.
they'd probably be cool with whatever.
Well, I got to ask, do you have any other projects coming up? I know you said, I don't know if you have some stuff you can share or not. Just curious what you have down the road.
Um, so not yet. I truly so got popular on TikTok. It's going away. I'm figuring out another way to do sketches and stuff. I think I'm gonna try to
Gotcha.
put everything on YouTube. But I'm in some things that we just finished filming and they'll be out like next summer.
Okay.
So working on some stuff with the buddies, but this spring I'm going to be out on the road. So I'm going to be touring. And if you're a listener that's in like Denver or Minneapolis or Madison, Wisconsin or New York, I'll be posting dates and stuff. And yeah, really going to work on coming up with new material post album is kind of
Awesome.
the big plan for the spring. And then
Then hit the
hopefully
road.
I'll hit the road, and then hopefully whatever platform lets me do sketches again,
Mm.
however that happens. Yeah, and if you're a listener in LA, come, I'm doing stand up all over town
Okay.
after the holidays too. So
Yeah, I was gonna put some links in the bio. Then what's the best way to follow you? Because I know you're on Instagram too.
yeah, follow me on Instagram for now, just because I would have said TikTok, 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
On Instagram at Sam Wiles, and I've got a link tree on there that's got show dates and
Mm.
links to the album and links to sketches and a lot of fun stuff. So
Awesome. Well, Sam, I got to say, it's been great to chat with you, and I frequent
pleasure.
LA, so I can't
Yeah.
wait to see you in
Hey,
person, do your thing.
hit me up, and maybe we could even watch some NFC West
Yeah.
contentious football.
You can stay on one side, I'll stay on the other.
I think that's appropriate. I think that's good for everyone involved.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, Sam, it was great to chat with you. I'm going to put the link so everyone can check out your stuff, stream the new or buy the new comedy album. And again, thanks for your time. It was fun.
Thanks so much.